The moment you stop caring is the moment everything sharpens. People misunderstand this. They think not. Caring means becoming cold, empty, detached from life. That's not what it means at all. Not caring is clarity. It's the removal of noise. It's the moment you stop bleeding energy into places that were never going to reward you in the first place. Music. And the brutal truth is this: most people are lost not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they care about the wrong things. With religious intensity, you care about being liked. You care about being understood. You care about how you look while you're still learning how to walk. You care about what people think while those same people aren't thinking about you at all. And that caring, that constant emotional investment, music, becomes the leash around your neck. You call it sensitivity. Machiavelli would call it vulnerability. Look closely at power, real power, not the loud kind, not the kind that begs for validation. Power moves cleanly. Power does not apologize for existing. Power does not explain itself to those who cannot benefit it. And most importantly, power is not emotionally entangled with outcomes it cannot control. The prince who survives is music, not the one who feels the most, but the one who sees the clearest. The clearer the path becomes, the less emotional weight you carry into every decision. When you care too much, you hesitate, you overthink, you soften blows that were meant to music land. You delay moves that were meant to be decisive. You negotiate with your fear and call it morality. But clarity does not come from moral comfort. It comes from understanding consequences and choosing anyway. Machiavelli never told you to be cruel for pleasure. He told you to be effective, and effectiveness demands detachment. If every insult shakes you, you'll never rule anything. Not a kingdom, not a business, not even your own mind. The world does not reward the emotionally exposed. It exploits them. Think about how often your focus fractures. One comment ruins your day. One rejection replays in your head for weeks. One moment of embarrassment follows you like a shadow. That's not depth. That's captivity. And the prison guard is your own need to care. The less you care about approval, the freer your actions become. When approval no longer dictates your moves, your strategy changes. You stop trying to be impressive and start being precise. You stop performing and start positioning. You stop asking, how will this make me look? And start asking, what does this get me? This is where most people recoil. They hear this and think it sounds heartless. But Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable. Morality without power is fragile, and power without clarity is chaos. The man who cares too much about appearing good often ends up ineffective, while the man who cares about results can shape reality itself. Caring too much makes you predictable. Your enemies know what buttons to press because you've labeled them clearly with emotion. Your pride, your ego, your insecurities, all exposed, all reactive. But when you care less, you become unreadable. Silence replaces explanation. Stillness replaces reaction. And suddenly, people are unsure how to handle you. Uncertainty is power. When you no longer rush to defend yourself, accusations lose momentum. When you no longer chase validation, manipulators lose leverage. When you no longer explain your decisions, critics lose oxygen. The battlefield quiets. And in that quiet, you see lines others miss. Clarity is not loud, it's cold, clean, and surgical. Most people think confidence comes from believing in yourself. That's a lie. Confidence comes from not needing others to believe in you. The moment their belief becomes irrelevant, your movement becomes unstoppable. You stop seeking permission to act. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop negotiating with doubt. Machiavelli warned rulers about being loved too much. Love is fragile. Love demands maintenance. Love dissolves. Music under pressure. Fear, however, respect. However, those endure. But even beyond fear and love, there is something more powerful. Independence. Music. The leader who is not emotionally dependent on the crowd can move against it if necessary. Translate music that, to your own life, the crowd might be your family, your friends, your audience, your peers. Their expectations are invisible chains, and every time you act to preserve their comfort instead of your trajectory, you tighten those chains yourself. The less you care about being misunderstood, the faster you move. Misunderstanding is inevitable when you step ahead of the group. If you wait to be understood before you act, you'll never act. History does not. Remember those who waited for consensus. The clearer the path becomes when you stop caring about fairness. Fairness is a story we tell ourselves to make chaos feel manageable. Reality rewards leverage, timing, and decisiveness, not moral balance sheets, Machiavelli observed. This not with cynicism, but with realism. You cannot navigate a storm by wishing the sea were calm. Caring too much about fairness makes you slow. Caring too much about loyalty makes you blind. Caring too much about reputation makes you fragile. Every excessive attachment is a blindfold. Detachment sharpens instinct. When emotion steps back, music, pattern recognition steps forward. You begin to notice who benefits from your hesitation. You begin to see who thrives on your confusion. You begin to recognize that many of your struggles are not external battles, but internal negotiations you never needed to have. This is where the path clears, not because the world becomes simpler, but because you stop complicating it with unnecessary emotional weight. You don't need to destroy empathy. You need to control it. Empathy without discipline is self-sabotage. Machiavelli understood that a ruler who feels everything equally cannot rule anything effectively. Selective caring is strength. Strategic indifference is survival. The mistake is thinking you must either care about everything or nothing. The truth is subtler and far more dangerous. You care deeply about your objective and remain emotionally neutral about everything that does not serve it. That neutrality isn't emptiness. It is focus. Focus is ruthless. Focus is unfair. Focus is lonely. And focus is what separates those who move history from those who comment on it. When you stop caring about the emotional comfort of others, you gain the ability to tell the truth without flinching. When you stop caring about being liked, your voice steadies. When you stop caring about loss, risk becomes manageable. And when risk becomes manageable, progress accelerates. The world rewards those who move cleanly. Clean movement requires clean perception, and clean perception is impossible when your mind is cluttered with other people's opinions. Machiavelli would tell you this without apology. If you want clarity, you must be willing to let go of emotional crutches, the desire to be seen as good, the need to be validated, the addiction to being included. These are luxuries of those who are not responsible for outcomes. Responsibility changes you. Music. When outcomes matter, sentiment becomes secondary. When consequences are real, feelings become data, not music. Directives. This is the turning point most people never reach. They cling to caring as if it makes them human, not realizing that uncontrolled caring. Music makes them manageable, predictable, and weak. Strength is not music the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of it. And once you master it, something unsettling happens. The fog lifts. Decisions feel simpler. Paths that once seemed complicated now look obvious. You stop asking what feels right and start seeing what works. That is when the path becomes clear, not because you found a map, but because you stopped letting emotion redraw the terrain every time fear whispered your name. Once you see this, you, music, can't unsee it. You start noticing how much of the world is theater. How many people are acting not to achieve something real, but to maintain an image. Image is expensive. It drains attention. It demands constant upkeep. And the more you care about protecting music, the less energy you have to actually move forward. This is why those who rise quietly often rise fastest. They are not announcing every intention. They are not emotionally broadcasting every setback. They are not asking for reassurance at every step. They are watching, calculating, music, adjusting. Machiavelli admired this. Silence, because silence cannot be attacked. Music directly. Noise invites resistance. Silence forces others to guess. The moment you stop caring about being seen as virtuous, you can finally be effective. Virtue that must be advertised is usually a mask for insecurity. True discipline is invisible. True strategy rarely feels noble in the moment. It feels uncomfortable, isolating, sometimes even wrong. But comfort has never been the companion of progress. Caring less does not mean you abandon your values. It means you stop letting your values be weaponized against you. People will appeal to your guilt. They will frame your hesitation as kindness. They will tell you patience is wisdom when it really serves their advantage. And if you care too much about how you are perceived, you will comply, calling it decency while slowly erasing yourself. Machiavelli warned that those who rely on the goodwill of others build on sand. Goodwill evaporates the moment. Conditions change. Interests, however, endure. When you stop caring about pleasing everyone, you can finally identify who benefits from your success and who only benefits from your submission. This is where emotional detachment becomes dangerous to those around you, not because you are cruel, but because you are no longer controllable. You no longer jump when expectations are placed on you. You no longer feel compelled to justify your choices. And when justification disappears, authority quietly takes its place. Authority is not given, it is assumed, and assumption requires indifference to approval. Notice how the most influential figures rarely explain themselves. They make decisions and others interpret them after the fact. Explanation is a form of permission seeking. When you stop caring about being understood, you reclaim the right to act without consensus. This terrifies people. Humans are comfortable when behavior is predictable. Caring too much makes you predictable. You react emotionally. You defend reflexively. You seek reassurance, but indifference disrupts patterns. People don't know where you stand, so they tread carefully. Machiavelli understood fear as a stabilizing force, but more subtle than fear is uncertainty. Fear provokes rebellion. Uncertainty breeds caution. When others are unsure how much you care, they hesitate. Music to test boundaries. That hesitation creates space. Space creates leverage. In your own life, this looks like no longer reacting immediately, letting silence do the work, letting others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. When you care less about music filling the silence becomes an ally. Most people are uncomfortable with this music because they mistake constant emotional expression for authenticity. But authenticity does not require exposure. Music. Privacy is not deception. Control is not dishonesty. You can be genuine without being vulnerable to everyone. Machiavelli would argue that vulnerability must be rationed, shared, only where it strengthens alliances, never where it weakens position. The person who cares indiscriminately is an open door. The person who cares selectively is a fortress with carefully chosen gates. Think about how often you reveal your doubts, how often you explain your fears, how often you seek emotional validation before acting. Each time you do, you hand someone information, and information is power. Not all power is used kindly. The less you care about emotional reassurance, the less dependent you become. Dependency is the quiet killer of ambition. It disguises itself as connection, but it functions like a leash. You begin to measure decisions by how others will feel rather than what outcomes they produce. Once you cut that leash, movement becomes lighter. You stop dragging invisible weights. You stop negotiating with imagined reactions. You act based on reality, not anticipated judgment. This is why clarity feels cold at first. You're removing warmth that once comforted you, even if it slowed you down. Emotional detachment feels like loss before it feels like freedom. but Machiavelli would remind you that rulers often feel isolated not because they are heartless, but because responsibility demands distance. Distance gives perspective. Perspective reveals patterns. Patterns inform strategy. When you care less, you stop personalizing obstacles. Failure becomes feedback. Criticism becomes noise, and opposition becomes data. Nothing penetrates deeply enough to destabilize you, and stability is rare. Stability attracts followers far more than emotional intensity ever could. People trust those who do not waver, not those who feel the strongest, but those who remain composed when others fracture. Composure is not numbness, it is restraint, and restraint is a form of power. The clearer your path becomes, the more you realize how many distractions once masqueraded as obligations, invitations you didn't need to accept, arguments you didn't need to win, opinions you didn't need to address. Caring less closes these doors automatically. You begin to conserve energy. Energy that was once scattered becomes concentrated. Concentration amplifies force. A focused mind cuts through complexity the way a blade cuts through cloth. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors those who are prepared to act decisively when the moment arrives. Decisiveness is impossible when you are emotionally entangled with every possible outcome. You hesitate, weighing feelings instead of facts. When caring diminishes, timing improves. You strike when opportunity presents itself, not when you feel emotionally ready. Readiness is often an illusion. Action creates readiness, not the other way around. This shift is subtle but irreversible. Once you stop caring about being perfect, you allow yourself to be effective. Once you stop caring about universal approval, you allow yourself to be respected by those who matter. Once you stop caring about comfort, you allow yourself to grow. Growth is inherently uncomfortable. It requires letting parts of your identity die. Identities built on pleasing others are especially music fragile. Machiavelli would see these as liabilities, music not virtues. The world is not moved by intentions. It is moved by actions, and actions are cleaner, faster, and more precise when emotional noise is reduced. You don't become less human when you care less. You become more deliberate. You choose where to invest emotion rather than leaking it everywhere. That choice is what separates those who drift from those who direct their lives. As this detachment deepens, you may notice resistance from others. Music. They will accuse you of changing, of becoming distant, of being cold. This is often a sign that your emotional availability once served them more than it served you. Machiavelli would tell you to observe these reactions carefully. Music. They reveal dependencies you didn't know existed, and knowledge again is power. The path continues to clear sight, not because obstacles disappear, but because you stop mistaking every obstacle for a personal attack. You stop engaging in battles that offer no strategic value. You conserve strength for moments that matter. This is where many music mistake indifference for arrogance. But arrogance seeks attention. Indifference ignores it. Arrogance reacts to insults. Indifference lets them die unanswered, and unanswered attacks often collapse under their own weight. The less you care, the less leverage the world has over you. And leverage, once removed, exposes truth. People reveal their intentions when emotional manipulation no longer works. They either adapt to your boundaries or remove themselves. Both outcomes are clarity. This is not a descent into emptiness. It is an ascent. Music into control. Control over your reactions, control over your energy, control over your direction. And once control is established internally, external chaos loses its power. Music. To distract you, you move forward while others are still reacting. You plan while others are still explaining. You build while others are still seeking approval. That is how the path becomes not just clear but inevitable. At this stage, something fundamental has changed. You are no longer negotiating with the world emotionally. You are observing it. an observation when unclouded by. Attachment reveals structures most. People never notice. You see incentives. Instead of intentions, you see patterns. Instead of personalities, you see outcomes instead of excuses. This is the level Machiavelli wrote for, not for the naive, but for those willing to accept reality as it is rather than how it should feel. He understood that the greatest danger to any individual seeking power over their own life is illusion. Illusion that effort is always rewarded. Illusion that honesty is always protected. Illusion that people act from principle rather than interest. When you care too much, you cling to these illusions because they comfort you. Letting go of caring forces you to let go of fantasy. And fantasy is expensive. It costs time. It costs momentum. It costs opportunities you never even realize you missed. Once caring loosens its grip, your mind becomes strategic by default. You begin to ask better questions. Not is this fair, but who benefits? Not how do I feel about this, but what happens if I do nothing? Not will this upset someone, but what is this position of me for? These questions don't make you cruel. They make you awake. Most people sleepwalk through their decisions. Music guided by emotion, habit, and social pressure. They call music it, being human. Machiavelli would call it being ruled by impulse, ruled by fear, ruled by the need to belong. Music. Belonging is one of the most powerful tools of control ever. Music. Created. When you care deeply about that belonging, you will betray your own interests to preserve it. You will stay quiet when you should speak. You will stay still when you should move. You will shrink to fit music spaces that were never meant to contain you. Caring less breaks that music spell. You stop performing loyalty to groups that don't protect you. You stop defending systems that don't reward you. You stop internalizing blame for structures designed to extract from you. This alone clears an enormous amount of mental space. Music. And in that space, ambition grows sharper. Ambition without clarity is reckless. Music. Ambition with clarity is lethal. Machiavelli respected ambition when it was paired with discipline. He despised wasted motion, emotional indulgence, and moral posturing that led nowhere. When you care less, your ambition becomes quieter but more dangerous. You no longer announce goals prematurely. You no longer seek applause before results. You let outcomes music speak because outcomes cannot be argued with. There is a reason results silence criticism faster than explanations ever could. You also become harder to manipulate. Emotional hooks no longer land. Guilt trips fall flat. Provocations fail to provoke. This frustrates people who once relied on your reactions. They may escalate. They may accuse. They may attempt to shame you back into compliance. This is the test. If you return to caring out of discomfort, you give them back control. If you remain composed, the dynamic shifts permanently. Power changes hands, not through confrontation but through consistency. Machiavelli understood that power is not seized once. It is maintained daily. Music. Through restraint, through patience, through the refusal to be dragged into unnecessary conflict. Conflict is often a distraction disguised as urgency. When you care less, urgency loses its grip. You can tell the difference between what is loud and what is important. Most people cannot. Clarity also changes how you experience time. You stop rushing emotionally and start pacing. Strategically, you are no longer desperate for immediate validations, so you can afford to wait. Waiting when intentional is not weakness, it is positioning. Fortune favors those who are ready when timing aligns. Readiness requires calm. Calm requires emotional control. Emotional control requires caring less about what does not matter. This is why so many people burn out. They care intensely about everything, every opinion, every outcome, every slight. Their nervous system is constantly on trial. Eventually, it collapses. You, however, begin to operate with selective intensity. You choose battles You choose investments. You choose where emotion is useful and where it is wasteful. This makes your presence heavier, not louder, heavier. People feel it even when you say less, because you are no longer leaking energy. You are contained. Containment is intimidating. It signals that you are not easily moved, that you are not desperate, that you are not available for nonsense. Machiavelli knew that perceived stability attracts allegiance. People gravitate toward those who seem anchored while everything else shifts. At the same time, your internal dialogue quiets. Anxiety loses material to feed on. When you stop caring about hypothetical judgments, your mind stops running endless simulations of rejection. Music, mental clarity follows emotional restraint, and you think straighter. You decide faster. You recover quicker. Failure, when it happens, no longer defines you. It informs you. You extract lessons without self-flagellation. You adjust without music drama. This is an enormous advantage in any competitive environment. Most people quit not because they fail, but because failure wounds their identity. When identity is no longer tied to emotional approval, failure loses its sting. This is freedom most people never experience. Freedom from over-explaining, freedom from over-apologizing, freedom from overthinking, freedom from carrying emotional debt that was never yours to begin with. Machiavelli would tell you that the ultimate goal is not domination over others, but mastery over circumstance. Circumstance cannot be mastered if your reactions are automatic. Music, automatic reactions are chains. The less you care, the fewer chains you wear. This does not make life empty. It makes it intentional. You still feel joy, but it is quieter and deeper. You still feel anger, but it is controlled and directed. You still feel attachment, but it is chosen, not compulsive. Choice is the difference. When emotion is chosen, it empowers you. When emotion is uncontrolled, it exposes you. As this continues, your life begins to align, not because things magically improve, but because you stop sabotaging yourself with emotional excess. You stop mistaking noise for direction. You stop confusing motion with progress. The path feels clear because you are no longer pulled in 10 directions at once. And here is the final irony. The less you care about being liked, the more respect you tend to receive. Not universal admiration, but something rarer. Credibility, gravity, presence. People sense when someone is not seeking anything from them. That absence of need shifts the balance immediately. You are no longer asking the world who you are. You are deciding. And once that decision is made, once caring is placed under discipline rather than allowed to roam freely, the path does not just become clear, it becomes unavoidable, because now every step you take is deliberate. Every silence is intentional. Every move is yours. And nothing is louder than a person who no longer needs to prove anything at